Have you ever felt the sting of doubters or haters in your life in any domain, or people who said that you'd never do anything or never make it somewhere? With this today, I'm going to bring you 12 lessons that I learned from the book called Choose Your Enemies Wisely by Patrick Bet-David. This is going to act as a book summary, and there's some really powerful lessons to be learned here. These are lessons where you can transform that emotional pain and turn it into a strength. It's going to be your greatest weapon to dominate in life and your business by using these fundamentals. So you can leverage that emotion and then dominate and transform those doubts into a success story. So the first thing I learned is after you've conquered an enemy that you've already beaten, it's completely useless to just keep expending energy on them. So what does this mean? Well, for an example, if you've already surpassed someone, if you've already proven someone wrong or beaten them in their own game or your game, the rivalry is officially over. There's no point to keep that going. It's just draining of your energy. And Patrick basically says in his book that once you've beaten that first enemy or your main enemy, you should be actually creating a new enemy. So for an example, a lot of people have enemies in their life, and we'll go back to the kind of consensus of the book and how you can figure that out. People create like mental enemies, usually from some kind of past trauma or people they don't like. So that could be someone maybe who bullied you in the past. It could be someone who maybe rejected you or made you feel bad. It could be anyone you just generally want to prove wrong or to beat in your life. It could be some kind of rival in sports or a rivalry in business. It could basically be any of those, right? And everyone has at least one of those in a certain domain in life. And once you've beaten them, you've proved them wrong, or you've surpassed them by maybe beating them in your chosen career field or doing something they told you wouldn't, then Patrick says you've already beaten that enemy. You've basically slayed that dragon. So to keep slaying dragons, you basically have to choose a brand new enemy to keep making progress and keep elevating. And another thing he basically says is he says that not every competitor that you have or people you're competing against is actually an enemy. Particularly, he says if there's no emotional element to it, then they're not necessarily an enemy, they're just known as a rival. And they're just a normal competitor. Then basically PBD goes through his kind of idea of how to create that enemy in your mind. So he says pick an enemy this year, pick a personal enemy, so one in your personal life, and then pick one in your business life, in your career field, right? Who are you going to go against? Who's going to be enemy this year? And he says assume that they wake up every single day to either put you out of business or to ruin your life. Even if they don't, just imagine that and imagine that they do, and that creates like the artificial competition. Obviously this works way better if there's a real element of that to it. So if you've actually got someone going against you, then it works even better, right? And he says, if you can't really think of anyone right now who could fit this profile, go back throughout your life in the past, it doesn't matter how many years ago that was, and make a list of all your enemies. Now, someone like me, personally, I don't really think it's a great idea to have enemies, but this is more of a mental game we're playing here, okay? This is to make progress and to create drive. This is especially a good method for people who don't really have much drive. This is a really good mental mind game for it. So of this list of enemies, you want to kind of sort them by a point system. Now how this works is people who produce the most emotional response or kind of like the most emotion in you, this could be like anger, upset, anything like that, gets the highest grade or priority on this list. So they're your top enemies or your top candidates to be your chosen enemies if you like. Then you need to write out a list. So on this list you need to write down whatever it is that they did to sting you the most, and the more details the better, because you're kind of reliving this moment. Now you don't want to think about this forever, but this is our temporary enemy for this year, right? So write it down, the more detailed the better, because it works the best. And he also says, which I thought was interesting in the book, he says let go of grudges. For an example, if this is just based on like a past dislike of someone, let go of the grudge and let go of any unworthy enemies that are below you now. So back to our first point, if you've already surpassed someone in life, if you've already proven them wrong, or if you really just don't care anymore, then they're not a worthy enemy, because there's not really an emotional element to it anymore. So they're crossed off the list. They're not at the top of the list. And then you want to kind of picture in your mind, how are you going to celebrate when you beat this enemy or these enemies on your list? What's that day going to be like? Try and picture it in your mind. And you can think of who are your direct or your indirect competitors. For an example, study these competitors, just like we do in the business world, and think about how are they positioning themselves against you, because everyone has a personal rival, but specifically in the business world, even if there's not really an emotional element to it, you're all competing in a market, right? So think about how are they actually positioning themselves to go against you, and then think about analyzing the social media and the business operations and see how they move and how they work and how they operate, and how you can either replicate that or do that better. The next section was how to be valuable as an employee. So for anyone who doesn't run a business and they just want to work really well in a high level corporation, Patrick basically outlines what he looks for in his own personal employees and the ones that work the best in his company. And he kind of outlines some of the strengths that they had, and he gives you some tips on being like a high profile employee in a big company. So how can you be valuable? Well, first of all, you identify an opportunity which is available to you, and you analyze the ROI, so the return on investment, and you need to write out a description of that. So let's just picture this as if I was the person hiring this person. This is what I'd look for. And then you can kind of flip it on its head if you're trying to get a job and trying to encompass all of these values. You need to identify what kind of opportunity this person's going to give you, analyze the return on investment they're going to bring, the contacts that they have, and the revenue opportunities from these contacts. If acquiring them in your business, if they're going to open you up to a new network or investment opportunities, then that's a high ROI on that person. That can really benefit your firm, right? What skills do they have that benefit your firm overall? And how can you benefit the firm? So if you're actually the person wanting the job, how can you give value to the firm itself? And then you want to explain how you'll stay consistent with this and keep giving value. And always ask how you can improve. Patrick basically says his best employees, which he gives the promotions, always ask how they can get better, and they always ask for feedback rather than just doing and not talking about it. So the next section was on meetings, which I particularly found interesting because I was actually listening to a podcast recently of Jeff Bezos talking about how he does meetings and how he doesn't even use PowerPoint, and he does like note taking. In the book, it talks about how you can have better meetings as a company and how you can optimize your time and get the most productivity out of people. The first thing is outlining why it's important, the meeting itself, what the intention of the meeting is, and the behavior and attitude that people need to have coming into the meeting. This is so you're setting the expectations from the get-go, and you're going to really make sure everything gets done which you set out to do, and you're not just sitting down and rambling. Now, he actually, ironically, that I mentioned this myself, he actually talks about the Jeff Bezos principle, because Amazon is a huge corporation, they've had some great success, and Jeff Bezos has some very clear-cut rules for his meetings, which Patrick Bet-David goes over in this book. So the first one was keep the group size manageable. If it's too big and people are talking over each other, for an example, then that's not manageable. Keep it small, keep it tight-knit, keep the most important people there who need to make the decisions. Then we also have no PowerPoints. So Microsoft PowerPoint, Bezos doesn't use this. He actually famously uses memos, and he utilizes stories and data to get his point across, and people read those memos before the meeting gets started, so they already know what's getting discussed before they go into it. Rather, in a PowerPoint presentation, they're kind of getting showed during the meeting. And this is why Jeff Bezos in Amazon meetings, he always starts off with silence so people can actually read the memos before beginning, and then after those moments of silence are up, everyone knows from the get-go how to jump into it. And then one of the next lessons was, if your employees in a business are intimidated by you, then they're actually going to withhold information and not be as forthcoming. Now, there's a lot of ways that people try to be a leader, and they always say be a strong leader, incite fear, and kind of be a dominative force. But if people fear you too much, they're not going to be honest with you and kind of divulge the information you want to give. So he kind of says you need to have a balance. They need to respect you, but they need to know that you're nice enough that they can be open with you to actually tell you everything. This is risky for the future of your business if your employees aren't going to always give you the honest information. For example, if you're losing money or you're bleeding cash or something wrong happens, it's not going to be good for the longevity of your business. You can work with them closely, build up kind of like a good work relationship to actually build loyalty with them and make sure that they come to you with any information which you need to know. He also mentions something which I actually found particularly interesting, because obviously doing YouTube and kind of online based businesses, I've always worked remotely. But what's interesting is he has like a completely different idea on remote work. So during the pandemic, everyone had to go remote. I think like most of the companies like Twitter and all the Silicon Valley companies, they all moved all their employees online. So they just worked remotely. They talked over like Zoom calls and did their meetings on Zoom. Now, Patrick says in his book that doing Zoom calls and working remotely is just not very good for a business, because he personally believes that a business built on culture is the best model. And you can't really particularly have any kind of culture if you're working remotely from other sides of the world or different places over a webcam. It just doesn't make sense. So he says that businesses that grow off culture and require energy from fueling each other isn't really optimal and can't really be built upon using remote work. Everyone needs to be around each other to create this sense of morale and communicate with each other and be present in the moment to get stuff done. And we all know when people work remotely, people can't actually watch what they're doing, so they always end up slacking anyway. So how can you build culture? There's a whole chapter where he talks about how you can build a good culture in your business. So first of all, he says encourage feedback. Make sure your employees can kind of give you a review on the things that have been happening in your business and tell you how they are and what needs improving. And also make things fun. Stuff doesn't have to be serious. If people are having fun, then they're having fun at the job and they'll work harder. And have monthly contests or competitions so people can win prizes. That's also a way to have fun. Use music so people can kind of work and listen and jive at the same time. In terms of the hiring process, hire people that actually fit the culture and don't try to force a fit. Because if you're hiring someone based on skill rather than who actually fits into your business, then it's going to kind of ruin the whole kind of like feeling of it, and they're not really going to like be in the right place. Utilize your personality if you've got like a good character, and use rituals, like things that you do on a regular basis and everyone has an expectation that needs to get done. He says invest in personal and professional people's personality as well as their actual skill set. Have a book of the month club. Now, I like reading books, but right now I'm really enjoying reading audiobooks or listening to audiobooks. He says have a book of the month club, so a book that everyone can read and then kind of discuss in the workplace. So they've got like a topic they can all speak about. Celebrate birthdays together, so have like parties at the workplace or out of work events for celebrating people's birthdays. And then deliver them handwritten gifts and cards on those events to make sure like they're actually feeling appreciated and actually heard and seen. Know people's dreams, so what do they want to achieve from their future? Obviously, you want to hire people who benefit the business, but if they have their own personal wants and desires, make sure to identify those, know them, and then work to help them realize them. And create like a merit-based system to realize those dreams for them. Surprise your team with spontaneous events, so like take them to a place that like they really want to go to, or host an event with like famous people there, or do something like the other businesses wouldn't to set yourself apart. And that's how to create culture. Value leadership over titles as well. That's quite an interesting one. And he also says allow for crazy things to happen. Now, I guess that's up to your imagination, but I guess don't be so serious. Just let things flow and don't really be too uptight about things. Have accountability, so if things go wrong in the business, always make sure people are held accountable to them and made sure that they're told how to do better next time. And with this, obviously have very high expectations and high standards that are just non-negotiable. And the last tip he has on that particular topic, which I thought was quite good, is treat people so well that they just don't want to leave your business. If you treat them way better than they are in another business and they're actually kind of like seen as a real asset rather than like another number, then they'll want to stay at your business, especially with this whole culture thing that he encompasses in this chapter. You're creating like a really cool culture where people feel part of something. And obviously when you're at a workplace, you're not really friends with those people usually, they're just acquaintances. But if you're creating a culture where everyone actually feels like real friends, that's what makes people want to stay. So I thought that was a really valuable chapter in terms of running a business. Now, of course, outside the business world, especially people who work for themselves and just generally just people in day-to-day life, they want to build a great circle, right? And recently, obviously, with like Tate and business people online, everyone talks about creating your own network and the phrase of you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourselves with or something like that. So Patrick talks about how to develop a good inner circle. And he says you basically just find a group, just like how you do as an employee. You find a group by offering upfront value, or create your own group and accept people in based on that same system. Things to look out for in people you surround yourselves with. So this is looking for high quality people, right? So the first one he says is confidentiality. Make sure what's said stays in the circle and people don't like leak it, especially if you're like discussing secrets or plans and you don't want people to spread those things, or maybe like you're telling them a secret that could ruin a surprise if they leak it. Zero tolerance for games. So he basically says anyone who plays mental mind games, anyone who's not forthcoming, or anyone who utilizes manipulation, which leads to a loss of trust, he says, is not to be tolerated. He also says that people in your inner circle should be very accessible and they're very easy to get hold of. If you can't call for them and they actually answer, or you can't get a hold of them, there's no point having them in your inner circle because they can't really be an asset if they're not there. He also says no drama. We all know those kind of people that just cause more drama than an actual benefit, so those people are just a no-go. And someone who offers insight, someone who can kind of help you with a certain situation, offer some kind of knowledge, or offer some value in that regard in general. People in your circle should pay attention to close details and go above and beyond. So if you say something valuable and they have a solution to it, they should basically go above and beyond to solve it for you or help you solve it. They need to have high credibility and they have connections, because remember, this is like a value exchange. Every friendship is a value exchange, right? So you're offering them value and support and they're doing the same. That's just the baseline of a friendship. But if they also have connections, then that means that they're a really valuable asset to you. Because when we're talking about an inner circle, we're not just talking about a personal friendship, we're talking about in a sense of like business connections too. Because obviously personal friends, you can have really good friends like from the past, from school, who are just great friends. They don't need to give you anything per se. They need to be able to take feedback. So if they mess up or they do something wrong, they need to be able to actually listen to feedback and take it on board. The worst thing really is someone who just can't take feedback. So for an example, let's say you're giving someone like a mentorship and you're teaching them how to learn the piano, for an example, and they just keep messing up, but they don't obviously take the feedback on how to improve playing the instrument, and they just never get any progress. Someone who defends you against others, for an example, if someone's talking about you behind your back, or if someone's criticizing you too much and they're not inside the group, that's a good value which Patrick says they need to have. Someone who will defend you against others. Someone with dependability. So a good quote that I'd liken this to would be when people say your word is your bond. So if you say you're going to do something, you better get it done, because otherwise your words are empty. So people who actually follow through with what they say, that's a good asset that Patrick says they should have as well. And it's not a one-sided friendship. They give you the same value that you give to them. Also, they need to be fun and humble. He says that arrogant people really have no place in your inner circle, and mostly arrogant people don't usually take good feedback anyway, so that kind of goes hand in hand with that. He also says they have to be presentable in appearance, which I found quite interesting, this one, because some people can be great people, but they don't necessarily dress in suits all the time. But he says they need to be presentable and not sloppy. So I guess if they're just not dressed in pajamas, for an example, then I guess they can be passed as presentable. He doesn't really expand too much into that. Now, he also outlines two big mistakes in business. So the first one would be valuing competency and results over trust. If you're hiring people, don't allow toxic people into the workplace, even if they're good. So just because they have a higher skill set, if they're a toxic person for your company, or they're not really a great person, then they shouldn't really be allowed into your company. Although he does say that certain toxic people or self-serving people, he puts into certain roles, but he doesn't put them in the high roles or the roles of management for a reason, right? And he also says another mistake is thinking every single role needs the same traits. He basically says each person has a unique place within your organization, which kind of goes back to what I said a moment ago, with people with different kind of personalities need to be put in different trust positions. Make it your focus to brag about other people's success, because at the start, when you're building something, it's interesting to talk about all your merits and all your accolades, but eventually people get really tired of you bragging about yourself if you're only talking about your own results or success. So he says, brag about your students or your employees. So if you're a mentor, or if you own a business and you have a lot of employees that you've helped get to a different place, or they've ranked up in your company or made great achievements, talk about their results and celebrate their results, and then other people will want to join your team. because he says if you're talking about other people's success, then other people will picture themselves in that situation and want to join your company. Whereas if you're kind of talking about your own success as a CEO or a business owner, it's a little bit less attainable for most people, and they just think that you're just being like braggadocious and they're not really interested in hearing it. This also kind of chimes into the same point which we mentioned earlier, where it's like treat people so good that they don't want to leave your company. He just says pay people above the market rate. If they're one of your best people and you can't afford to lose them, make sure you pay them well, because they're probably bringing you a great return on investment from the things that they're doing anyway, so they're always worth paying well. The more people you hire that can kind of get tasks done for you, the more free time you have yourself. So that was my summary on Choose Your Enemies Wisely by Patrick Bet-David, which was a pretty interesting book to listen to, because I actually listened to it on Audible. Now, if you do want to check out this book, I would recommend it. I think I listened to it in just one day. I think it was around 7 hours. It'll probably be much longer, obviously, if you read it. I'll link the book down below if you want to buy it on Amazon. If you use my link, it'll help me out, and you might get a better deal on it. And also, you can get 30 days free of Audible if you click on the link in the description down below too, and you can listen to it on audiobook form, because I don't really have that much time to actually read right now, because I only really read when I travel. So basically I just bought the book on Audible for £7.99, and I believe you can get it for free if you use my link down below. If you just get the free trial, I think it gives you one free book, so you can just click the link, get the book for free for 30 days and listen to it. And the great thing I like about Audible is it actually lets you speed up like the narration speed, so it actually like half the time that it takes to listen to it, because I listened to the book on like 1.7 times speed, so it just made it really quick, but I could still understand it and it wasted less time. So make some notes like I did and check it out, and make sure to like the video and subscribe, because I'll be bringing some more book reviews soon on some really great business books that you can learn some really great lessons from.